Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the Josh and Artemis Show. Today we have a very special guest. We have Billboard Chris on the show. He's currently backstage. And we're going to get into the whole topic that we, talk about pretty much daily of, children should not be on puberty blockers, what's going on in the world, what's going on in the West. Anything you'd like to add?
No, you've summed it up perfectly. We're big fans of Chris. As you guys know, we do talk about him a lot on this show, and we do post a lot of his stuff onto X as well. So it's a real pleasure to have him on the show today. He's someone who we really admire, and he does a great job in campaigning to raise awareness for this and highlighting and showing how just disturbing and wrong this all is, and pointing out the obvious effectively, because we all know it's wrong. But Chris does a great job in sticking to the facts and going around universities, campuses, and the public and raising awareness for this. So it's a real pleasure to have him on the show. We'll bring him in now.
All right. 1 second.
Here he is.
Here we go. Hi, Chris.
Hey,
how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. Where are you coming from?
We're just outside Toronto, Canada.
Oh, okay. I heard the accent and I thought maybe you were in England.
Oh, so yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm from the UK. I've been here for about 2.5 years now.
Almost,
right?
Yeah. Almost.
And I've come into Justin Trudeau's world here, which is a very crazy place.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you guys made a great observation in your intro there. Everybody knows this is wrong. This is not really controversial. It is, and it shouldn't be. But more than 90% of the population, of course, knows that we shouldn't be stopping the development of perfectly healthy children. And we shouldn't be cutting off their body parts. This is the height of insanity. So I'm glad you guys recognize this, because some people think there's some large block of the population who support this, and there isn't at all. So we can talk about that. We can talk about this California ballot initiative, which would stop this in the most populous state in the union. Again, some skepticism is there. People thinking maybe it won't pass. Total nonsense. But we have to get the signatures for that. That's a really big project going on. But yeah, let's just have a good time. I'm so thankful for you having me.
Of course. I mean,
we're thankful.
Yeah, it's a pleasure for us. We were talking and briefly backstage there. You're actually a big part of our morning routine.
Yeah.
We usually grab a coffee or two, and then we put you on YouTube. And it's usually the James Klug stuff
videos,
when you go around all these college universities and campuses and things and talk to the students there. And the impression we get, it's always so crazy how you get so attacked by these students simply just for stating a fact, and it really ties into the mentality of young people these days. I think how they've been corrupted by this woke agenda in all of these universities now. I mean, what's like your thoughts when you go around all of these universities and speak to these kids?
So I get a lot of support on these campuses too. Of course, there's always going to be a contingent on any university campus of extremists, of these radical leftists, and even people who are moderately on the left have been deceived. And it's primarily young white women who are pushing this. And this ideology preys on their natural agreeableness and their empathy. And they're being lied to and deceived and told that if we don't transition kids, they're going to kill themselves. They're also told that puberty blockers are reversible. These are really the only two arguments they ever have. The third rather popular one is, well, what about intersex people, they say. Intersex is a misnomer. The actual term we should use is people who have disorders of sexual development. This has nothing to do with trans. The people who have these various disorders hate that they're constantly brought up in this. But these really, they're just not very intelligent people, have fallen for all these lies without doing their research. And they think they're so inclusive and loving and superior morally, but they know nothing about this. So I don't worry too much about them. They make for entertaining viewing, I suppose. But my objective is really to reach the people in the middle who don't know anything about this, because as soon as they learn, they're horrified. And out of every 1,000 people I talk to, some of them are going to be lions, and they're going to wake up and they're going to get activated and they're going to fight this themselves. So we're starting an avalanche of concerned parents and other people who just can't believe what's happening to kids. And we're going to put a stop to this sooner than later.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, what's the impression you get when you speak to these people? Is it an overwhelming response that they're aware of this, or is there a large number of people who aren't really aware of these issues?
So it improves every month, to be honest with you. It always has throughout the duration of my campaign. When I first started, nobody really had a clue what puberty blockers were. When I wear this sign that says children cannot consent to puberty blockers, that's my main message. And people would come up to me all the time and say, what the heck are puberty blockers? And it takes about 10 seconds to have that conversation, which is, well, these are drugs given to kids who think they're the opposite sex, and it stops their bodies going into puberty. And the average person right away goes, what? They can't believe it's happening. So that might turn into a longer conversation, or they might go home and do some research, or that might be it. But at least I planted that seed in their head so they're aware of this issue. And then, of course, you're going to get less than 10% of the population who are pushing this. And again, they're not all evil. A lot of them are just deceived. So this is like a cult that's infected all of society, and we essentially need to deprogram these people. But honestly, we can get to them last. We need to reach all the people in the middle.
That's true. Because, I mean, we've seen, certain people that you've talked to on the streets or even on campuses where they're like, well, I didn't realize like this is kind of what's entailed. It's more, you kind of, if you're not paying attention to it, but you're sort of aware of, LGBT plus like the whole alphabet there, like, you're kind of aware, but you don't really get involved with it, then they don't really understand the impact of puberty blockers or the complications and what you'll suffer through if you do go through those surgeries, and how you'll basically be tied to the medical industry. And also, the statistics that you bring up, which we appreciate so much, like you back it up with science of, if we allowed children to go through puberty, then most of them will grow out of it, or other underlying like mental health issues, or child abuse or autism, like other things that could play a role in that. And I think those are the important things that should be highlighted. And, especially in government and stuff, when they're pushing this onto children, they should be very blunt with the implications that would happen if you did proceed with these routes, like puberty blockers or surgery. I think it's more like glorified than actually stating facts of what would go on otherwise.
The only way this can have success is to glorify this, to dumb down the terminology and to use fluffy terms for all of it. Instead of calling it what it is, which is a radical elective double mastectomy being performed on children who've been deceived into thinking they were born wrong and will only find happiness by trying to look like something they're not. Instead of calling it that, which is what it is, they call it top surgery and bottom surgery and gender affirming care. Oh, who would be against gender affirming care? That sounds lovely to the uninitiated. What is gender affirming care? It's a childhood sex change. They're trying to change the sex of children.
Just mental.
10-year-olds, 11-year-olds, 5-year-olds. They'll tell, oh, yes, little girl, you're actually a boy. Or they'll tell these effeminate little boys that really they're girls. When historically kids with gender dysphoria, which was a fraction of the population, 1 out of 20 or 30,000, historically this affected mostly boys. And a lot of these boys, these really effeminate little boys who wanted to be girls, a lot of them when they grew up to be gay. So they call this the LGBTQ community. There is no such thing. There's your sexual orientation. Transgenderism is about a denial of reality itself. The Q is for queer theory. This is about tearing down all the normal boundaries and making it so that everything goes in society. Like what we saw today on Twitter in Spain, where you've got 8-year-olds and 10-year-olds and 12-year-old girls walking down the street in lingerie. And I'm not even going to get into it all because it's gross, but they're celebrating pedophilia on the streets of Spain in a parade. That's all part of queer theory. And we can't live in a society that tolerates this.
Yeah,
no, we shouldn't.
It's been, I think one of the sinister parts of all this is the rise in this sexualization of kids. And, I've seen a lot of changes with the language as well. You mentioned about the sanitization of the surgeries there. There's also been a sanitization of like pedophiles and there's been this change in society, which we've noticed, they're not longer called pedophiles, they're called minor attracted persons, which has been a fringe theory for a long time, but you've seen it really come to the forefront the last few years with this movement. It's really coincided with the rise in the transgender movement. And, you can already tell where this is going. It's a very slippery slope for me. And I think if we don't stop all this, I think the next stage of this is to kind of normalize language like minor attracted persons.
Yeah, which we'll never use, because a pedophile is a pedophile. And you shouldn't try to be sensitive to those people who would actually do those things to children, in my opinion.
So the theory behind some of these people who push this, like James Cantor in Toronto, the University of Toronto, this is a man who acknowledges that we shouldn't be transitioning kids. Yet at the same time, he says we shouldn't stigmatize the poor pedophiles. Because he says, and many of them say this, these people in academia, I don't know what happens to them when they start working in academia for years, but something goes haywire in their brains. He says that pedophilia is innate, that it's a sexual orientation. And the problems with it are only when people act on it. And we shouldn't stigmatize these poor fellows. No, we should stigmatize the heck out of it. Because as soon as you normalize this at all, you give it approval. And of course, you're going to have more people acting on it. And you get like what we have in the streets of Spain today.
Yeah.
This is nothing new. Pedophilia is nothing new. It's been around since the dawn of man. And we constantly have to fight back these cultural movements to normalize all of this perverse stuff. And we just have to keep doing it again. So this fight never ends. It's one we're always going to have to do. And there's wide support for it. But then you get these academics pushing this nonsense. Oh, it's just a sexual orientation. They can't help it. And you get some of these bleeding hearts going along with it. And so, no, we just need to say no. We actually need to take back ground. Instead of just standing firm where we are, we need to take back a lot of ground because we've lost way too much ground in this culture war already. And I wish the Conservatives in Canada would actually take this up, but they won't. They don't want to touch any of this.
I completely agree. I mean, we were a bit disappointed. I mean, it was great to see the Danielle Smith announcement and stuff, and it's a good little step in the right direction. But, we've talked about this on the show a few times. We did a whole dissection of her announcement, and the impression we got was it didn't go far enough. It was very much a pandering for me still. It was very much trying to appease both sides. But for me, there's nothing wrong with someone coming in and putting their foot down and just saying, this is just completely wrong, guys, and we're going to put a stop to this. I mean, why do you think the Conservatives didn't just take a stronger stance with this?
Okay, so medical care and the education system in Canada is all run by each individual province. There's no federal Department of Education.
Yeah.
And each province runs their own medical care. However, we do have federal bills like Bill C-4, which all the Conservatives voted for, which make it a crime to help your child feel comfortable with their body. It's okay to convince them that they're trans and should become a lifelong medical patient. But to say, no, I object to that. Little girl, you are a girl. And we're not going to cut off your breasts. And we're not going to give you puberty blockers and testosterone. Well, you can risk losing your child now to the state. So they are getting involved federally, even though this is technically a provincial issue. But what Alberta did is a start. So these are half measures in many respects, but a half measure is 100% better than no measure. So it's still great. It's a vast improvement. It's the first time anyone in Canada has taken this on. And sometimes you have to start small and then grow into this later. So what Alberta did was stop all puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones for kids under the age of 16.
Yeah.
16 and 17-year-olds will still be able to take them. I don't agree with that.
No.
Obviously, but it's a start. No surgeries under 18. That's good. No more keeping secrets from parents when a child is socially transitioning at school. That is taking on a different name and pronouns. So these are all great improvements. The leftist media, of course, and the liberals, Trudeau's party, have all gone completely nuts, trying to use this to virtue signal how terrible the Conservatives are. How dare they say we shouldn't sterilize children? And they're breathlessly complaining about it. But you know what? Yeah. The people see through that, and we have such wide support for this. I wouldn't worry about them at all. In fact, let them make more noise and let them complain more. because it only backfires. The only way this cult of gender was ever able to grow in the first place is because it grew in silence, where people weren't speaking up about it. So let them make all of this noise. All they do is get more people to look into it, and when they do, they're horrified.
Yeah, for sure. And you made a great point there, but this is a cult for sure. I mean, we've talked about this a few times as well. Yeah. It's very much, it follows the same traits as every, pseudo religious cult you can imagine. The main one being like a Scientology kind of cult for me, where it's not really founded on any truth at all, and it's very abusive and it's very aggressive, and it's the targeting of people who aren't on board with the messaging is very aggressive for me. And we've seen countless examples of people online. We had Taylor Silverman on the show a few days ago. We had April Hutchinson, who I actually see in the chat now. And they've been targeted with really bad abuse simply for stating a fact that everybody knows. And I just think it's unbelievable, excuse me, how we've got here as a society where we're debating things which we've known for hundreds or thousands of years, that a man is a man and a woman is a woman, and there's a clear difference between the two. And we've gone back, we're kind of regressing, we're going over things which don't need to be, talked about again. And I mean, how did we get here, Chris? Because we always debate this, and it's always there's always so many different theories as to how we got here. But how do you think we got here as a society the last few years?
So we could spend a few hours just on this question.
I know.
Human beings are prone to believing nonsense. And this is all based on a lie that we have a gender identity that might be different than our sex. This theory of gender identity was really first coined in the 60s. This actually goes back to pre-Nazi era with this man named Magnus Hirschfeld. But in the modern era, as we look at this today, it was started by a psychologist named Dr. John Money at Johns Hopkins University with this theory of gender identity. And he experimented on this little boy who'd lost his penis in a circumcision gone wrong. The mother reached out to John Money. She found out about this research he was doing. At 8 months of age, these two twin boys had gone to get circumcised, and this mechanical device malfunctioned and burned this little boy's penis right off. So together with the family, John Money and these parents decided to raise this boy as a girl. They didn't tell him he was a boy. They grew out his hair and put him in dresses, because apparently that's what it means to be a girl in this cult of stereotypes. And Money is a pedophile. He had these boys doing sexual things to each other every year when he had appointments with them. And long story short, David Reimer, the boy, ended up committing suicide. His brother drank himself to death. But he wrote up his research as though there were positive things happening. And this theory of gender identity floated around academia for a long time. People like Judith Butler pushing this, intersectional feminist. She's still teaching this nonsense today. And when gay rights were won, really around 2010, the fight for all these different gay rights were won. All these so-called LGBTQ organizations turned their focus to trans rights, because they're not just going to close up the doors and turn off the donations and fire all these people. They got to keep all that going. So their new objective became trans rights. And they've been very successful in conflating gay rights with trans rights, when really these things have almost nothing to do with each other. In fact, it's harming kids who would grow up to be gay. But these 5 letters, LGBTQ, strike fear into the hearts of men and women and stop them from speaking up. Because if you say anything about child transition, oh my gosh, you're some terrible bigot. You're anti-LGBTQ. No, fool. We just don't think you should sterilize kids and turn them into anorgasmic, lifelong pharmaceutical patients with body parts cut off. Every normal person in the world understands that. So people are finally finding their voice again, and they're getting over this stigma of being anti-LGBTQ, because we should be able to have conversations about this. But this was the one thing that everyone was afraid to talk about. So that's why I set out on the streets like I did, because it isn't enough to have this conversation in our echo chambers online. We need to be out in the real world, talking to people from all varieties of life to raise awareness about this, because people have no idea what's going on, because how could they? the media won't report on it.
It's true.
For sure. And so what's the inspiration behind it? Because obviously you've been doing this for a few years. Was it just a case that you got to the point where, you know, enough was enough and you had to do something about it?
And with the Billboard too.
Yeah, so basically enough was enough. I started learning about this in 2019. And then all through 2020, every night I was reading about this. As my wife would be marking homework at night, I'd be obsessing over all these issues. And the more I read, the crazier this got. And then in July of 2020, a woman put up she put up a poster at the Edinburgh train station that said, "I love JK Rowling. I heart JK Rowling, the Harry Potter author, the world's greatest children's author, a lifelong feminist, a leftist, who for some crazy reason thinks that women have sex-based rights and that we shouldn't be sterilizing kids." So apparently she's now become a pariah to the left and is some hateful individual just because she speaks common sense. So Posey Parker put up this sign. It got taken down after a day because some people on Twitter complained. And so part of this for me too is, like I just said, we should be able to talk about this.
Mm-hmm.
We shouldn't be getting canceled for having common sense, compassionate opinions. And people are kind of trying to attack our freedom of speech. So I reject that wholeheartedly. So I followed her beautiful lead and I put up a billboard in Vancouver that said the exact same thing. I heart JK Rowling. It also lasted just a day because a Vancouver politician named Sarah Kirby-Young said it was hate speech. And she pressured the sign company owned by billionaire philanthropist Jimmy Pattison, who's not involved in day-to-day operations. I wish he was, because I'm sure he would have supported it.
Mm-hmm.
But the sign company, who has a monopoly basically all across Canada, in suburban centers especially, took it down. And so I was ready for that. I leveraged all the outrage online. This news went viral. And I did a quick little fundraising campaign. And a week later, had one up in San Francisco, and then Los Angeles, Portland, all throughout Utah, all throughout the metro in Washington, D.C., and then Times Square. So that was my September of 2020. I was very busy, didn't sleep a lot, and lost 16 pounds. But then what was I to do in Canada? I'd run out of money. I was being libeled and defamed and just attacked by thousands of people online who couldn't believe that a man got involved. These feminists said I was trying to co-opt a women's only movement. Can you believe it? Anyway, they were the only ones really talking about this at the time. That was kind of annoying, but I'm not going to let a bunch of feminists stop me. So at the end of September, with no money, almost no support, only a handful of men in the world talking about this, I decided, well, they can take down my billboard, but they can't take one off my back. So I had these signs made. I wear them. I know I look ridiculous, but I try to snazz it up with a blazer. And I go outside and I don't approach people. I don't have a bullhorn. I just stand there at the busiest places I can find and on university campuses. And I wait for people to have conversations. And I realized right away, this is way more powerful than these big expensive billboards sitting beside the road, because there's a person behind it. I'm not hiding. And so I record these conversations now. I didn't do that for the longest time, which wasn't smart of me, but I record them. Some of them I post online. It helps to educate people about this and helps to teach them how to talk about it. And most importantly, it's inspiring other people to take action, because today, where there were just a handful of men talking about this in the world, now this is the number one topic talked about on conservative airways. Mainstream media is even talking about it. Even the New York Post and the New York Times and the Washington Post are even talking about this. Yeah. New York Post, of course, is talking about it. But so many people have learned about this that victory is simply a matter of time, because they will never unlearn what they have learned. They will simply continue to learn more and fight back more. And I know way quicker than most people think we're going to put a stop to this child abuse.
Yeah, I mean, the truth always prevails. And so this transgender narrative is not true. So eventually the walls will crumble. And I think we're starting to already see the cracks. Obviously, some days it doesn't feel that way with the way things are in the world, or when things like what's going on in Spain comes out, or in the US, in Canada, in Australia. There's, so much going on. But at the same time, I think more people are talking about it. More people are willing to share things online about it. They're not as afraid even just to hit repost on something. At times people used to be afraid of doing that. Now they're actually reposting things, commenting on things, saying this isn't right. And so slowly you are seeing a turn of people willing to talk about it. And especially when you talk about it with people in real life, like, anyone we've talked to, like friends and stuff, just think like, how is this going on? How is this even a thing? And it's like, exactly, like, this is like crazy. And you talk to the average person, and they also agree, but it's also like they don't know how deep it's going and where it's going into schools and government and mainstream media, like all over the place. You see it on social media, is like, and especially certain ones like TikTok, like they really push this agenda. But also the average person doesn't realize that, because I guess unless you're really looking for it, maybe you might not notice it. You're kind of focused in on like your own little bubble. But like I think there is slowly starting to change things. Like, we did have the Danielle thing come out. We had Pierre finally kind of say that, it's not right. Like, I think it was good, but it wasn't as good as Trump's announcement. I will say that, because Trump kind of just cut it right to the point. Was like, yep, first day in office, all this is banned. Pierre kind of did like a little vanilla flavor of that, but was still good. He basically said, not to minors, adults should make those decisions. But nothing really like definitive, concrete or definitive. Yeah. Like, so what's like the action plan kind of thing?
Well, so first of all, Pierre will say this is a provincial issue. No. Mm-hmm. He has a platform where he can reach 1 million Canadians every day through the media. Every time he talks about this, what he should be doing is recording 3-4 minute videos every day to educate people about what's actually going on. Get ahead of it. Instead of being reactionary to these lying leftist media members, get ahead of it and just tell the truth, and you'll educate the population. You want to move the Overton window? Then move it. Don't wait for someone else to do it. But Trump himself, yes, now he's speaking out about this, which is great. Mm-hmm. All the different people fighting this have made it safe for these politicians to speak about this, and they've also educated them. Because I can tell you 2 years ago, not even 2 years ago, more like a year and a half ago, I was meeting with some staff with the House Oversight Committee in Congress and a couple members of Congress and different people in Washington, D.C., and they didn't want to touch this. They just wanted to talk about the sports issue, men and women's sports.
Was this on the Republican side, or was it the Democrats?
Yeah, you were talking on the Republican side. Right. Even they were too afraid to touch this because they didn't understand it. So people say, why isn't everyone speaking up? Well, when people don't know what to say, they won't say anything at all. So the first step is always education. We've got to educate people, because when you educate them about what's going on, you light this fire inside of them, and some of them are going to take action. But really, we had to educate the population about what's going on. Mm-hmm. And, a lot of these legislators are parents. Yeah. And the conservatives, the Republicans in the states, have learned that this is a hugely winning issue, because polls drive a lot of what they do. And they were just afraid to talk about this, because then the media comes for them and says there's these anti-LGBT bigots. But as soon as they learned what was going on, and these Boston Children's Hospital videos that I tweeted out were a huge help in that, because they showed people for the first time what's going on behind the curtain, where you've got this woman with this perky little video and beautiful music playing in the background talking about how they're doing gender-affirming hysterectomies at Boston Children's Hospital. And then we've got proof of their own people where they're cutting off the breasts of 14-year-old girls. Yeah. Or we've got Kellen Lackhart at Kaiser Permanente in California admitting on camera that they cut off the breasts of 12-year-olds. Yeah. We've now got Layla Jane, who's suing. She was 13 years old in 1 month when they cut off her breasts. She was in grade 8. She'd suffered trauma. She had autism. Half these kids have autism. Yeah. There's always something else going on. It's never really gender dysphoria even. It's always something else, and gender's being used as the excuse for why this child is having anxiety or upset in life.
For sure.
And so we've just had to educate the population, and now they're doing their jobs, and other people are coming along and they're wearing their hats. Like there are 4 men now, 4 dads in Texas who started a new law firm. They all left their previous law firms. It's called Campbell Miller Payne. And they just felt called to fight for these kids and these young adults who've been harmed. So they're suing for detransitioners. They've got about a dozen lawsuits going on right now. And one of those lawsuits is against the American Academy of Pediatrics, whose policy statement was written by a medical resident named Jason Rafferty, who's also getting sued because he was involved in the case of abuse of a girl in Rhode Island. So because he was directly involved in this young girl's case, and because he wrote the policy for the AAP, they're able to tag in the AAP. So they're suing them now as well. And I'm very confident with lawfare and also with the insurance industry refusing to provide liability insurance. This whole thing is going to come crashing down very quickly in the States. And then Canada, always the follower, will follow suit, as will the rest of the world.
For sure. We had Dr. Eitan Heim on the show, I think it was last week.
Yeah.
And he was telling us about his lawsuit, what he's currently going through in relation to him exposing. Did you hear about his story? The guy who exposed what was happening at Texas Children's Hospital.
Yeah,
I might have this person confused. I thought you were talking about a Canadian doctor for a second there.
No, he's from he was doing a residency in Texas. He was a whistleblower because in Texas they had a policy where they were going to stop all gender affirming care. But what was going on behind the scenes at Texas Children's was they were actually continuing it, but not promoting it like on their website anymore, or, you know, there was no like pamphlets or anything if you go into the hospital, but they were still doing it in secret. And, you know, once he realized that and could see like what was still going on with, you know, puberty blockers, like installing them in their arms and these surgeries, he decided to come forward first anonymously, and then he decided that, you know, he needed to just do it like full out with his like face and like come forward with it. And yeah, he exposed what was going on there, which was really sinister.
Yeah, he got into contact with Christopher Rufo. Do you know him? The journalist. Yeah, he did a big interview with him a few months ago. And he did expose a lot. And then I think it was last week we had someone from the psychiatry.
Oh, in Washington.
Yeah, who came forward as well. So it's good to see that more doctors, people involved within that industry are coming forward to expose this. So I do think there is going to be a bit of a change coming this year for sure.
Yeah, the whistleblower you referenced from last week is in Washington State.
Yes.
Yeah.
And she's a psychologist. Who I think her name is Tamara. I'll be meeting her sometime.
Yeah,
Tamara.
I'll be meeting her sometime because she's just down the road a couple hours from me. But
okay.
Yeah, so she blew the whistle on this. There's a great article in the Free Press. I tweeted this out again. I'll tweet it out again and put it to the top of my Twitter for those who want to see it. But she was dealing with just terribly abused children, kids coming from the psychiatric units. This one girl, the only genre of video she had seen growing up was extremist porn that her mother was showing her. She was raped by her stepfather. She was sucking on a soother and wanted to identify as a dog. And all the other counselors were saying that none of this was prohibitive to giving her puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones. That's all irrelevant. All these other things going on in her life. What?
I know. As if that's going to treat what else is going on mentally with this child. Like, it is infuriating sometimes when you hear these stories, and it's neglect on the child and child abuse. Like, it's so blatantly obvious if you were to tell anybody this, but some of these doctors are pushing this onto kids, and it's like to fill this quota. Like, they know that if they get them young, these are like little cash cows to them, and they'll be tied to the medical industry. And I mean, it is infuriating because, you know.
So there is the money component, and I don't want to discount that at all. And for sure, there are surgeons making huge coin on a lot of this, and they're completely unethical. They're evil, to be all honesty. But there are also the true believers. And you have this whole counseling profession where some of these counselors, they're so open-minded that their brains have fallen out. They have so much empathy that they can't possibly think. What the heck are all these counselors, and it's a majority of them, a vast majority, doing? Simply affirming the delusion of a child who now thinks that she was born wrong or he was born wrong, and they need to be something or not. They're not. This is abusive. This whole ideology is abusive. Never mind the physical harm being done. It's extraordinarily psychologically abusive. What message are you sending a girl when you call her he, him? You're telling her she needs to be something she's not.
Yeah.
That she wasn't born right. And that the only way she'll find true happiness and not want to kill herself, is what they're told, is if she cuts off her breasts and takes testosterone and sterilizes herself. After 4 or 5 years on testosterone, these girls have to get hysterectomies. Sometimes they're cutting out their ovaries as well. So now they can never produce estrogen for the rest of their life. And then they get to the age of 24 or 25 when their brain's just finishing developing. All the love bombing and attention they got in the past is gone. All those people have moved on with their lives. And now they're medical patients, can't get a partner, can't have a baby. And we know with studies in the adult population that suicides peak 10 years after the fact of sex reassignment surgery. Yet the only thing these leftists will tell you all day long until they're blue in the face is that kids are going to kill themselves if we don't transition them. That's their only argument. Why do they use it? Because they know that it shuts people up, and they know that it will manipulate parents into going along with this. These doctors in these gender clinics literally tell parents that they can have a dead daughter or a live son. And these parents who are desperate to help their struggling child go along with it some of the time.
It's been, because we've got 2 young girls here ourselves, and we could not, even imagine saying that to the girls, that they were born wrong. It's such an abusive and manipulative thing to say to a little kid, and just basically just saying that they're wrong and that they should feel bad about themselves. And that's when we had Dr. Heim on the show last week. He made a great point that these kids are being told to adopt an identity which is based on hatred of their true self, which I think sums it up perfectly for me. That it's so chilling, and it's just crazy to us how it's just openly accepted in our society now that a parent, that schools, that governments, like we're seeing here with the Liberal Party, are campaigning for this to be a reality. And I think that's what was so interesting, but also very disturbing about the reaction from the Liberal Party with the Danielle Smith announcement was how angry they got with what Danielle Smith did, which, like we said before, wasn't really a strong stance for us. It was kind of just a middle of the road stance for me. And you could see their reaction, how angry they were that that these kids can't get abused anymore. So it was just very telling to us how that happened. And I think it was Randy Boissonneau, I think his name is. He described it as the NATO moment for the LGBTQ community, which I just couldn't believe.
Yeah, these leftist politicians and these extremists, they're just bullies, is all they are. They use violence to silence. They scream bloody murder. And they've relied on this for a long time to get their way. They're a bunch of babies having temper tantrums, and we're all afraid of them. What are you afraid of in your life? If you're a psychologist in Canada, guess what? You can speak up. To not speak up is to violate the oaths and the agreements that got you into this profession in the first place. Your job is to protect these kids, not send them into a den full of lions and wolves, which is what you're doing. You can speak up. There are counselors down south. I hear this all the time. Oh, they can't speak up because they lose their jobs. Really? I know 2 in Oregon who spoke up. One runs a podcast every week exposing this. She's still got her job. Some people have filed complaints, but those complaints didn't go anywhere. Sometimes the punishment is the process. And sometimes you just have to go through that process because life's not going to be perfect. And you can either be a coward and you can look back at your life in 40 years and say, I did nothing about all these kids who were coming to harm. Or you can take a stand. You can stand for something in your life instead of being weak the entire time because you have student loans or a mortgage to pay. Just speak up, do your job, do it the right way, do it smartly. But there's nothing preventing most people from speaking up. They just think there is, and just that thought stops them. Be smarter. There's a lot of ways you can speak up against this.
No, for sure. And that's what we try to do, because we debated this for a long time behind the scenes. Should we be talking about this on our show? And it got to a point where, just effectively what you just said there, but it comes to a point where you have to raise your voice because it's too important not to say something about this. So for the last few months, we talk about this pretty much every single day.
6 months or so now.
And, we haven't been...
And you're on YouTube.
Anything.
And you're on YouTube.
Yeah, we're on YouTube. Yeah. We're on X.
They haven't taken you down.
Yeah.
I can count on... Guess how many times I've been... I don't do much on my own YouTube. I need to get that started. But I've given hundreds of interviews with other people on YouTube. Guess how many of those interviews have been pulled? None.
Yeah.
Zero.
Yeah,
most people would be shocked to hear that. And most people are looking for reasons, in all honesty. They're looking for reasons not to speak up.
No, for sure. We completely agree. I think it is just, there's just this culture now of people just being afraid to tell the truth. And we always say this on the show, but there's nothing wrong with telling the truth at the end of the day, you know? And no one should be afraid of that. But
especially about this.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah. You know,
like this is the future generation that, you know, in 10 years from now, what are these kids going to feel? Like they're going to feel like they were abandoned by the people who they thought loved them the most by letting them go on these puberty blockers or get these surgeries that are irreversible and not be able to potentially start families if that's their choice. Like they won't have the choice. And, you know, they're going to feel still like when they look in the mirror, they're not going to recognize who they are because you can't fix a mental health illness physically. At the end of the day, like you're not going to fix anything if you don't fix what's up here. And so, you know, to tell a child that they're born wrong, if they change their sex, whatever, which you can't do, but if you get all these things done, you're still going to feel like you're born in the wrong body because now you're going to look in the mirror and say, well, I don't feel like I connect with this either. And that's when the problems occur. And then they're going to feel probably a lot of resentment and hate and, you know, they'll spiral even further and they'll still have the same mental health issues that they might have had since they were a child.
Yes, these young people come up to me all the time on the street and at university campuses. I've talked to hundreds of them. They're not happy. But if you did a survey, and this is where this gets down to like being in a cult. If you did a survey of them, are you happy that you transitioned? They're all going to say yes. Go ask those Scientologists who are working more than 100 hours a week for the C organization if they're happy being a Scientologist as they're being abused and sleep deprived and sometimes aren't eating and are cleaning toilets for punishment. Go ask them if they're all happy. Every single one of them is going to tell you they're thrilled that it's the greatest thing ever.
Yeah.
And it's the exact same with this. I've tweeted out some of these conversations. I was at Florida State University actually with Chloe Cole. She was a young detransitioner. When she was 15, they cut off her breasts. When she was 13, they gave her puberty blockers and just testosterone. But this trans-identified person who I think is a female, to be honest, it's hard to tell. And I don't say that to make fun. It's hard to tell.
Hard to tell.
But this person had also testified at the legislature the day before. And she came up to us and was very adamant that she was so much happier that if she hadn't transitioned, she would have killed herself. And she's telling me this as she's screaming and crying and shaking, visibly shaking. This is not a stable, happy individual. No. So these surveys are meaningless. These people are not happy, but they've committed to this. Look what they've done to themselves. Most people aren't going to admit, yes, I made a massive mistake. That takes a lot of courage. They're also getting attacked by their former trans community the second they say they're not trans. Yeah. Because like all cults, this isn't about helping you to be who you really are. They just want you to be trans.
Yeah, they want you to conform.
That's right. And people self-police their own thoughts. They won't even allow themselves to look at the truth. And the parents who go along with this too, they're never going to be able to admit that they actually harmed their own kid. So they'll go to every one of these legislative bodies and testify on behalf of transing their own kids as though it's saving their child. But these are all delusional people and we just need to ignore them.
For sure. And you mentioned about the suicide thing earlier in the show. What's like the difference between the suicide kind of rates between people who haven't transitioned yet versus people who've transitioned later? Is there a difference, you know, in terms of suicide rates? Is it higher after someone's transitioned, or is it lower?
So there are literally no studies with kids. All these children are lost to follow-up. If they stop taking testosterone, for example, the gender clinic has no idea, or Planned Parenthood has no idea. They don't have a clue because there's no follow-up. But we know the most comprehensive study ever done into suicides with trans-identified people was done in Sweden over a period of 30 years. Several different data sets. People weren't lost to follow-up. And it showed that about 10 years after sex reassignment surgery, suicides were 40 times higher than the general population. And after accounting for other people with similar mental health issues, they were 19.1 times higher than their peers. So it's not stopping suicides. If anything, it's increasing it. Yeah. All the data we have points to an increase in suicides. And the best data we do have on kids is from the Tavistock, where from 2010 to 2020, the suicide rate was 0.027%. There were 2 children being seen by the clinic and 2 children on the waiting list out of thousands and thousands who killed themselves. There are currently 15,000 kids on that waiting list. But the suicide was 0.027%. Lower than that for kids with other conditions. Lower than that for kids with autism. In line with other mental health comorbidities. There's absolutely no epidemic of suicide. This is a vicious, manipulative, coercive lie. And it's all the left has. So we need to pay it no heed and just do what we know is right. And that is that children are beautiful just as they are. No drugs or scalpels needed. For sure.
And that's what we always try to promote here in this house, you know, that the girls can, you know, they don't have to conform to a stereotype of like a typical girl. I mean, with, you know, they play with trucks, they play with Barbies, they play football, as you would call it, soccer. With me, I always play that in the house of them. So they're, you know, they do a lot of different stuff. But if that was somebody else and they, you know, wore kind of like boy clothes, I guess you could say, or they're playing with trucks, I mean, some parents would genuinely think that they're born in the wrong body and they would take them down to one of these clinics, which to me is just wouldn't even come into my head to do. But it's just crazy how it's not, you know, it's this ideology has corrupted so many parents, and at the end of the day, it's based on something which just fundamentally isn't true, and there's fundamentally no proof that someone can be born in the wrong body. It's just nonsense at the end of the day. So it's very weird how people have been corrupted by this.
Let me read the message I got today, if I may interrupt.
Sure.
Because this is very important. So I won't say where this mom is, but I've been talking with this mom for about 3 years, probably more than 3 years. And I've met her daughter. On the first day of school, this is in Canada, a few years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, this girl was asked by the teacher for her preferred name and pronouns. They had just moved. Her parents had just separated. So there had been some family trauma. This girl has ADHD and very likely undiagnosed autism. And she developed really early. These are all things that girls don't like. And she decided right then and there, at the teacher's, I guess, not urging, but making it possible, approving of it, this girl decided right then and there that she was a boy. And she was sent to the school counselor, who hid from her mother that she was now identifying as a boy. The school counselor gave her instructions on where to get binders without her mother knowing. And mom eventually found out. The counselor lied to her. The mom was smart enough to record this conversation, played it for the principal, where these lies were caught. And the counselor faced no repercussions, but they did stop sending this girl to the school counselor. And the girl started getting outside counseling. Fast forward to the end of the year, this girl was doing better. She had taken a break from her outside counseling. And at the end of the year, the school counselor asked how her counseling was going. Well, she said she's not getting it anymore. What did the school counselor do? She contacted Child Protective Services. And the mother and the daughter individually, and the father, who wasn't really in the picture, all had to give separate interviews to CPS. So now this mom is going through this nightmare of possibly losing her child because she knows that giving her testosterone isn't the right thing to do. So this has been a long saga. This has taken years. I've met this family. I've met this girl. She was extremely withdrawn, you know, trying to hide herself like a lot of these girls do, head down, looking at her toes. But today, I get this message. My daughter told me today she thinks she wants to be a mother someday. She's now 16. This all started when she was 11. She's also been asking lately how she can look more feminine. Clothes are changing. Hair is growing. Good thing she didn't get her breasts cut off, isn't it? Or become sterilized from puberty blockers. Thank you again, Chris. I can confidently say now that this nightmare is behind us. And her message to parents is this. I think it's important to mention this started when she was 11 and she's almost 16 now. Parents can't give up. This is a marathon, not a sprint. As you know, I never once pressured her in regards to clothes or hair or anything, but I stood my ground firmly in reality and focused on the mantra, there is no right or wrong way to be a girl. You just are. I got this from you, she said. I also dedicated my life to strengthening our bond. It was my number one priority above all. She needed to know she could trust me. We spent lots of time together bonding, and I think that helped the most. And that's always my number one recommendation for parents, is you've got to work on that bond. You've got to do things together. You should be reading to your child every night. I don't care what age they are. It's a great bonding time. You need to sever all connections to social media and anyone in their life who is influencing them in this way. It's a smart thing to do to take vacations out into the wilderness if you can. Just get into nature, get outside, get them out of their head. You don't need to send them all to therapy. The number one therapist is you, the parent. In fact, the most beneficial thing you can probably do is get therapy yourself, get counseling yourself as a parent so that you know how to talk with your child. Because sometimes therapy just gets them more into their head and they just need to get out of it. So people just need to be encouraged that in almost all cases, these kids are going to grow out of it. We know historically with kids with severe gender dysphoria from a very young age, not this craze that we see today, almost all those kids grew out of it. And a lot of them did grow up to be gay, but 80 to 90% of the time, they just grew out of it. So leave the kids alone. The cure for gender dysphoria is puberty itself. Now we have these doctors blocking the cure.
Yeah. And to me, it's just a criminal act that these doctors, you know, who we're supposed to trust that they've got our best interests at heart, are going against the very basic care that they would have for somebody just to further their own ego. That's the way I see it, because none of this is based on truth. It's based on a lie. And these people are in positions of power. They look after people. And to me, it's a very ego-driven thing for a doctor to do. It's very much feeding into this cult-like behavior, which we've talked about today on the show. I mean, how in terms of the medical industry, do you think we're going to see more of a change there? Because obviously there's steps being taken with the Danielle Smith announcement. You know, it is a small step, of course, but are you speaking to people within the medical industry here about potential changes or people coming forward to expose this here? Because obviously we've seen it in like the States, but do you think it's going to happen here?
So a lot of doctors, a lot of people from all walks of life reach out to me all the time and they object to this. A lot of doctors are too scared to speak up. The doctors pushing this are never going to stop of their own volition. We have to stop them because these are, for all practical purposes, cult members working inside of our hospitals. It only takes 2 or 3 doctors at BC Children's Hospital to see 1,000 of these kids. Most people in the hospital are great. They're not involved in transitioning children. But there's always going to be a few of these true believers. I would legitimately call them psychopathic individuals and sociopaths. But they're always going to exist, so we have to stop them. And to do that in Canada, we need our politicians to find a bit of courage. They need to stop worrying about what the left says about them and realize politically this is a winning issue. But beyond that, you are obligated morally to speak up when you're in a position of power like that. It's absolutely shameful how silent all these politicians have been.
They should just be doing what's right at the end of the day, in the best interest of children, which isn't to butcher them. It's to let them just be kids. Like just leave them alone. Stop saying that if they're playing with certain toys or doing activities or dressing a certain way, that means they're automatically the opposite sex. Like what happened to tomboys? Like girls who just prefer doing things that boys do. Like, I mean, that was always a thing growing up for me. Like, and you know, it's like there's nothing wrong with that. Like you can do what you want. That doesn't make you not a girl or not a boy. And yeah, this whole movement is very like anti-gay, anti-lesbian, because you know, some of these kids would grow up to be gay, which there's nothing wrong with that. But also some of these kids will just grow up to be whatever they want to be. Like it's insane that, you know, it's even gotten to this point. But you know, with more conversation comes more change. And so hopefully that the more that everybody is talking about this and bringing more awareness, you know, and just having those conversations, kind of letting those guards down, that will help the tides turn and, you know, bring back just common sense and like normalcy and science and facts, and just leaving children alone and letting them just live, you know, the best years of their life, which they'll realize later is just no responsibilities, like just enjoying their childhood, no bills, no jobs, like just letting them, you know, grow up and, you know, have an imagination and be who they want to be. Like, you know, that's not a lost art. It's just we're like, this society is like losing its way, but I think it's coming back slowly. But, you know, I don't know. I just wish it would just go away. I know that sounds naive, but I just wish everybody would just stop. And
well, we have to make them stop. And, you know, when it comes to messaging on this, I think a lot of people don't know how to talk about this. When you just complain about something all the time, it's not very effective because people don't tend to like complainers and negativity. So focus on the positive aspects of what it means to be a child. There's no right way to be a boy or girl. Everyone agrees with that. The most raging leftist cannot disagree with that. We shouldn't put kids in some stereotypical box. They all agree with that. So say things to these people who are on the fence who may be antagonistic. Say things that they agree with. And then they don't know what to say because they themselves are deceived and they have this blind spot where they agree that we shouldn't be stereotyping kids, but they don't even see that they're pushing stereotypes to such a degree that they think we should now be sterilizing and maiming children.
Yeah.
Because what does it mean to be a transgender child? Say things they agree with. Our children are beautiful just as they are. No drugs or scalpels needed. Everyone pretty much agrees with that. And then ask questions. What does it mean for a girl to be a boy? And just wait. Give them the time to answer because they can't.
Yeah.
And they're going to realize the shallowness of their belief system. They have no idea why they believe what they believe. They just believe it because they've been told to believe it and because their social circle believes it. What is a transgender child? Sometimes they might tell you things like, well, you know, girls tend to like nail polish and long hair and pink and dresses. So if a boy likes nail polish, does that make him a girl?
No.
Oh, of course not, they'll say. Okay, so what does it mean for a boy to be a girl then? And they got nothing. And in that moment, they might not agree with you, but you've got them thinking. Yeah. And like all cults, people self-police their own thoughts. They don't allow themselves to confront the truth. Anyone who comes out of a cult doesn't come out because you told them how wrong they were and you argued with them. They come out because they were always questioning it themselves in the back of their mind. And then one day they let those questions come more to the forefront of their mind. And they finally allowed themselves to see it for what it truly is. And we have to give these people that space to do that.
For sure. And I think with this whole cult mentality, which we're seeing with this group, it can get really bad, of course. And I think it's been very interesting to see in the media where we've had these shooters, you know, who are killing people the last few. I mean, it seemed to have ramped up the last few weeks, to be honest. I see a story pretty much once a week, it seems like now. And it's very interesting how the mainstream media just refuse to touch it for me, you know?
That or they actually use like the preferred pronouns of the person who's done it. And it's like, no, I mean, call them a man. Like, they're not a woman, whether you like it or not. Like, use the proper pronouns and not, you know, pander to their mentally ill state that's caused them to do this.
Yes, there have been a number of them. I don't think it's been every week, but in the last year, there's definitely been a handful of them, far more than any other period. And some of them have been female as well, which is very unusual. I just read, I think, a stat yesterday, 97.7% of mass shooters are male. Yet they won't release the data whether these women are on testosterone or not. But I think it's pretty clear. Talk to any of these women who did transition, who went on testosterone. They'll all tell you that it made them more angry and aggressive. And they're already, these are people who are deeply mentally unwell. And instead of getting the treatment they should be getting, they're having their mental illness affirmed.
Yeah.
They're being told it's beautiful. They're celebrating it. And then they're giving them hormones which don't belong in their body, which cause more harm. So the medical industry has a lot to answer for. Just like other things. Lobotomies. They did this for decades. The inventor got a Nobel Prize in medicine.
Yeah.
And it consisted of taking ice picks and sticking them through the orbital sockets of your skull and through your eyeballs, basically above your eyeballs, and jabbing away at the prefrontal cortex of your brain.
Yeah.
Based on what? Science. Absolutely none. But some people who are deeply unwell maybe calm down a bit. And this was celebrated just like transgenderism is celebrated. This is celebrated in the media as a miracle cure. It's the same thing today. It's just a different issue. Psychology, our psychology never changes. We're the same upstairs as we have been for 100,000 years.
That's a good point you made with the comparison with that era as well. And I think this transgender movement, you know, the mutilation of kids will go down as one of the biggest medical scandals in history. You know, it kind of already is, but of course it will be confirmed when all of this does go away in a few years, in my opinion. We've just went past the hour, Chris, but just before you go, I know that you're a busy man. I wanted to ask you about this California ballot, which you mentioned before the show. So is it okay to just talk about that for a little bit?
Yes.
Just explain it.
This is the most important thing going on in the world right now in terms of fighting gender ideology. Every single person fighting this should be focused on this because California is the most populous state in the union. There are almost 40 million people there. It's where the most kids are being harmed. It's also arguably the bluest state in the union, or the most insane when it comes to this. Gavin Newsom and people like Scott Wiener are writing some of the worst bills in the country. California is a sanctuary state where any kid from any other state in the union can run away from home, say they want to get a sex change, and they won't return the kid home.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if Tennessee or Texas or Florida pass laws to stop this. The child can run away to California and they'll never get their kid back. Even a non-custodial spouse could take their child to California. They'll ignore arrest warrants, subpoenas, court orders, and custody agreements in order to transition the child. So the politicians will never pass a law, not in the near future at least, to stop this child abuse. But Californians can write their own laws. They have these ballot initiatives where they get to vote. It's like a referendum on particular issues. So we need to collect about 550,000 verified signatures. The government will throw some of them out. So in reality, we probably need 800,000.
Yeah.
But when people go to vote this November, this will be on the ballot. No more puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, or surgeries for kids. There are two other aspects to this law that the people have written, which will get boys out of girls' sports, and it will stop teachers and schools from hiding from parents when their own child has a new name and pronouns. So we know we have broad support for this. The polling is dramatically in our favor. It's 3-1 in our favor in terms of stopping child transition. I can tell you with absolute certainty it's way higher than that because I've conducted the biggest poll in the world. I talk to these people face to face. And as soon as you have any sort of conversation about it, they all agree that we should stop this. And the communities most against it are the ones who typically vote Democrat. It's the Black community, the Hispanic community, the immigrant communities. None of them are down with this. This is primarily pushed by white leftists and primarily females. So I know this ballot will pass, this initiative will pass, but we have to get it on the ballot. And the money isn't coming in to support it. We need big donors. We can't just do this with $30 and $50 donations. We need a few big donors, just a few. We just need a couple $1 million to hire the ballot. I can't speak. We need a couple $1 million to hire the signature gatherers whose job it is to go out and get those signatures. They're doing a phenomenal job just with the grassroots movement. And Korean churches are joining in. There's a Korean church just the other day who printed off 90,000 of these petitions to get people to sign. So the grassroots movement is getting thousands of signatures per day, but we need to get them all in by middle of April. So there's a time crunch. And I encourage every Californian watching this to go to protectkidsca.com, download the petition, sign it, mail it in, follow the instructions exactly. If you're an American citizen, you can donate. And if you're not an American citizen, you can help me out. You can go to billboardchris.com. You can donate there. because I'm spending a lot of time down in California. I'm going to be going down there next week to raise awareness about this and help them out. And indirectly, it'll help get this initiative passed by helping me. So I really appreciate your support.
Brilliant. And you mentioned about the interest there. Has there been any kind of conversations or interest from these bigger donors you've mentioned which need to get involved? Have you actually spoken to people?
Yes, I've spoken to many. I've had conference calls. There are some things in the works. And for some of these people, this gets into the weeds a little bit. Some are trying to maintain anonymity,
right,
which can be difficult. So that's been a bit of a problem. But there are a lot of people out there. There are a lot of fish in the sea. I think people just need to learn about this ballot initiative. We need this to become a snowball rolling downhill and turning into an avalanche, because the support is there. I think we'll still get it done. I'm not accepting defeat, so I'm going to do whatever it takes to get it done. But yeah, we do need donations, and we do need individuals volunteering their time, collecting hundreds or thousands of signatures themselves.
For sure. And we'll try our best to raise awareness for it as well. We have dropped it in the chat, but we'll link it
in
after the show as well, for sure. And we'll keep promoting it as well as best we can. But we'll leave it there, Chris. We know you've got another appointment to get to, so we don't want to keep you for too long.
But we did want to highlight that April Hutchinson would actually love to speak to you sometime. Let's bring up.
Where's she at?
Where's her comment?
Call me right now, April. Send me a DM. I'll give you my number.
Any day wearing a billboard.
Yeah. She's.
Are you familiar with April Hutchinson?
Yeah. Yes, she can protect me. She can be my bodyguard.
Yeah, she's a tough chick. But she's also
a power lifter who lost a medal to a man.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now this man actually, he's come out and said how he's always been a natal woman. He was pretending to be trans to support the trans community just because he's now not allowed to play in Alberta. That's where he lives, which is just absolute madness. And a simple swab test will show that he's really a man.
Sounds like another very mentally stable individual.
Super stable.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting how that kind of announcement goes down with the trans community as well, because it's anti-trans at the end of the day.
I think even as a trans person, you would be offended that somebody was pretending to be trans to support the trans community when really they've always been a woman, which is also lies, because anybody with eyes can see that this has always been a man who used to compete in men's powerlifting as well. Let's not forget. So we should arrange a speaking event and get a bunch of people out, because I don't just go around just standing on street corners randomly anymore. I have a lot of demands on my time, so I'd like to maximize the things that I do. And if I'm going to go to Alberta or whatever, I think we should try to organize an event with a few hundred people, because that's way more powerful. It gets other people activated and gets them doing stuff, because it can't just be a handful of people fighting this. We need a whole bunch of them fighting it. So if anyone wants to help arrange an event in Ontario or Alberta, please reach out to me. I'd love to come. Well, I don't know if this is too short of notice, but there's actually an event on March 8th. It's a Friday. And April's going to be one of the speakers there. It's we could send you the details in a DM, but it's happening on March 8th, and there's going to be several speakers. I think Rebel News is going out there to cover some of the media. We'll be there. And basically just talking about the gender ideology, women's sports, and basically all of this cult behavior that's going on today. But yeah, we can send you the details, but I don't know if that's short notice.
I'm not going to invite myself, but if someone wants me to come, they can reach out.
International Women's Day.
International Women's Day, that's it.
Oh, is it on March 8th? I should know that, I suppose. But yeah. We'll send you that in a DM as well.
All right.
Just in case.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
You're welcome. Thanks so much, Chris. We'd like to have you back on again, so we'll keep in touch behind the scenes, of course.
For sure. Is there anything you want to promote, like what you're doing next?
I don't plan too far in advance because things always change, but yeah, I might go to CPAC, but I'll probably be in California next week for sure. I'm going to be down there a lot. I'm going to be going to Australia soon, and I need to hire people. I really could use some support. I don't love asking for support, but I have so many things I need to do, and I just don't have time or resources or people to do it. So if people want to help me out, they can do so through billboardchris.com. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Sounds good.
Well, yeah, thanks so much, Chris. We'll let you go. We'll stay in touch, obviously. We'll send you the details about that event in the background. And yeah, we hope you enjoy the rest of your day and take care of yourself, and we'll speak to you soon.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
Thank you again so much for coming on the show.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Oops.
Brilliant. So that was Chris, Billboard Chris, of course, who we're huge fans of. Great to speak to Chris. Really nice guy. Really has, you know, this is someone who's like an expert in this area for us.
Blurry.
Somebody who has done a lot of research, a lot of activism, a lot of campaigning, and like he was saying in the show tonight, you know, it does feel like wheels are starting to move with, you know, with this topic, with.
Sorry.
What the hell are you doing?
The camera, it's really, I don't know why it's gone blurry.
It doesn't matter. But, you know, it's good to hear that things are moving in the background. Wheels are turning and positive change is coming for the public and for these children and for women. So it's great to see.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
No. Yeah, for sure. I think, like we've always said, guys, like the more you talk about it, the more you have conversations, the more things get pushed forward. So keep having those conversations. Don't shy away from them. Your voice does matter. Whether you think you're looking at this or watching this show and you're thinking, yeah, but I'm, you know, who am I? It's like, well, you're a person and you do matter. And the more that you talk about this with your friends, your family, I don't know, with anybody on the street, at the store, who cares? The more that you bring awareness to it, the more you will not only feel comfortable talking about it, but you'll feel more confident, and you'll realize that what you're talking about actually really matters. So, yeah, keep having those conversations, guys.
For sure. I mean, we've said this a million times, but there's nothing wrong with just telling the truth. And that's what people need to remember about all of this. It comes down to two things: being honest, telling the truth, and not being afraid to have your voice, because we've all got a voice. We all should be using it. And like Chris said, you know, everyone needs to stand up to voice their concerns with this and to protect children. And you know, we're doing this to protect the future generations of people here. That's the reason why we're all trying to raise awareness for this. So great to speak to Chris. We'll obviously try and get him on again at some point in the future, and we'll send him the details about this International Women's Day event, which we will be going to with April, who's in the chat. And she is going to come on the show on Sunday. We talked to her today, and she's going to come on the show again. So looking forward to that. That'll be her third time on this show.
I know. I think she just loves us so much.
She loves the Josh and Artemis show. She loves it.
Well, we love her too. So it's mutual, April. It's mutual.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we'll share more details. We also have a guest coming on Thursday, which we're really looking forward to. So we'll put that out there probably by tomorrow, guys. But yeah, until then, keep having conversations. We'll put the links we put Billboard Chris's link already in the description of this video, but we'll also put in the protectkidsca.com in the description too. So you guys can check that out for the California ballot, those in the United States watching this, because we do have viewers all around the world. So thank you very much, guys, for tuning in. We'll be back tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern. Make sure you give this video a big like, a share. Give us a follow on X, on YouTube. It really means a lot to us and does support the show. Thank you to everybody who is a member on Patreon and YouTube. It does mean a lot as well. Yeah. We go live pretty much every single day, unless we randomly take a day off when we're really tired. But for the main part, we go live every day at 8 p.m. Eastern. And, you know, we bring you these important topics and discuss the madness in the world.
Absolutely. So thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.
Take it easy and see you tomorrow night.
See you. Have a good night.